Welcome back to the program. It's the Vicky McKenna Show, and I've got Dan Lennington from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty to talk about a few different things if we can cover them all. And they're not all related. They are sort of standalone things. One has to do with DPI refusing to turn over information that it has on teacher licenses and reasons for rescinding teacher licenses. The other is Arrowhead Schools not letting a girl put a Bible verse, I think, in a speech. And the other one is the Jim Troopis case, is Josh Call trying to gag Jim Troopis' defense team and himself so that the media can't actually see the case against Judge Troopis. Let's start there, although I've covered this a little bit, Dan, which is the Department of Justice, Wisconsin Department of Justice, is trying to gag both the defense and itself from sharing the discovery on the case that supposedly exists against Trump's attorneys from 2020.
Yeah, this is very strange because they're relying on a constitutional amendment we passed a while ago called Marsy's Law, which was a constitutional amendment to protect victims' rights. And what the Department of Justice is saying is that they don't want their evidence against Jim Troopis to get out in the public before the trial because it would hurt victims. Now, if you think about this case, the idea of false electors, which is an outrageous charge, that the victim that Josh Call is claiming here is actually the government. He thinks he's the victim. The state of Wisconsin thinks it's the victim. There's no individual person who had, was the victim of a bank robbery or assault or something like that who needs to be protected. This is the Wisconsin Elections Commission, the people who run the elections, maybe the Supreme Court, maybe Josh Call's office itself. But that's not what Marsy's Law is intended to protect. It's not intended to protect the government here. And so I think that what they don't want is they don't want a lot of this information percolating out in public before Josh calls up for election in November. Yep. And it's going to be very embarrassing because we already know that there's embarrassing stuff out there, like memos from Josh Call's own attorneys saying that this is not forgery and this is not fraud. February 9th, 2022, a memo from Wisconsin Department of Justice employees, Josh Call's subordinates, saying that there's nothing wrong with what Jim Troopis did. But now somehow it's forgery, fraud, and so it's if that memo already exists and it's out there, what else is there? What other internal emails are there showing that the employees that work for Josh Call don't think that Jim Troopis did anything wrong? There must, and a lot of those people should be called as witnesses at the trial. Josh Call's own office is probably the best evidence in support of acquittal for Jim Troopis.
Yeah, I'd call him as a witness. I would. Yeah. I'd call his attorneys and I would call him as a defense witness. I would. Wait, you said. So there's another thing as well, and that is likely communication between Call's office, lawfare groups, and the Democratic Attorney General's Association, which the DOJ, U.S. DOJ, is now investigating in the Arizona case. These are nearly identical cases. And so that potentially could be made public. It wouldn't be made public by Call, but it would be made public by Troopis. And one of the things that Call is saying is the media attention is why I'm a victim. He's the reason there's media attention on this. He's the one who held the press conferences. And yet he's saying what I did makes me a victim. And so now don't force me to share with the public how I am corruptly prosecuting this man and these other Trump aides.
Yeah, I mean, this motion they filed, the only reason for a protective order, they say, this matter has generated the attention from media and the public. Well, no kidding. No kidding it has. And what you guys have done, while you guys have tarnished the reputation and attempted to bankrupt a very good lawyer and judge from Wisconsin with this outrageous claim, just because he happened to represent someone you don't like, President Trump, is crazy. And now in the records, just to maybe to segue to the other issue, the records that would be turned over to Troopis in this case are public records. They are records created by the government that basically support Troupis's position, and the public should have a right to see records that it paid for, that it generated. And so why can't we see? Why can't I file a public records request and say, give me all the evidence you have against Jim Troopis? And why can't I put that out on social media and let the public know about that? That takes away my ability to know what our government is doing.
It's a gag order for everyone, but also it doesn't allow the defense to defend itself either. So when the government claims it's a victim, and it's going to gag the defense as well. So Troopis wouldn't be able to put this stuff out. He wouldn't be able to say, hey, I'm going to hold a press conference now. I just got information through public records and discovery that's exculpatory to me. I'm going to hold a press conference. My lawyers are going to talk about this to the public, which they are not only permitted to do, but encouraged to do on behalf of a defendant. And so, and to your point about public records, this is just plain old public records stuff we're talking about here. But they would gag the defense from making a defense and in pursuit of a venue change. So the only press in Dane County where this is going to be tried has been negative. Okay, with the single exception of my show, consumed by exactly zero of the 87 to 95% of liberals who would be comprising the jury pool, there has been nothing but negative attention and erroneous information out about the Troopis case. So this is all in pursuit of a venue change. And he's trying to gag the defense from making the case for a venue change.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and I don't think, frankly, Josh Call has any interest in trying this case before November. It's very unlikely that a trial would start before November. I think he's probably embarrassed by the whole thing, that he has been saddled with this lawfare that he has to now pursue on behalf of the National Democratic Party, and it could hurt his chances at re-election if it comes out that this whole thing falls apart and Jim gets acquitted. But there is an election in November, and people can choose who the Attorney General should be. And I think how the Attorney General spends his resources is one of the things that voters should take into account when making a decision.
I would think so. And he does have a challenger, and it's Eric Toney. All right, you mentioned public records, and I do want to segue into public records here. And this is only tangentially related because it's an issue of public records. Here's DPI. DPI has identified the public records that Will has requested, right? They have identified the public records, but they are saying that you're going to have to pay them $34,000 to get access to the public records they've already identified, which have to do with teacher licensure removals, which have to do, of course, with behavior. Now we're talking about, why would you remove a teacher's license? Typically behavior related. Tell me about this case, because this seems like on its face, it violates the law.
Yeah, well, the good news is that Wisconsin has one of the strongest public records law of any state in the country. So it's fantastic. Just so your listeners know, any record that a government creates, with very few and minor exceptions, you get a right to see. And you get the right to ask your government, show me those records, show me those emails. You can do it. It's very easy. With AI now, you can have AI create your own records requests for government agencies and monitor them. So it's very easy to ask for documents right now. But the problem is that certain agencies, DPI chief among them, just resist and don't want to turn over public records because it draws scrutiny on their behavior and their regulation of our education system in Wisconsin. And what we have been doing at Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty is researching why certain educator licenses are denied. And we submitted a public records request almost a year ago to DPI, and it said basically this: hey, could you give us all the licenses that have been denied for a particular reason? And they didn't respond. And then just a few months ago, finally responded and said, look, we've identified 1,381 denials of educator licenses, but it's going to take us a long time to go through each one and decide exactly why they were denied. So pay us $17,000 and we'll do that for you. And we responded immediately and said, look, hey, you've already identified the documents. How about you just give all of the denials to us, and we'll go through them. So you don't have to charge us anything because you can only charge us for location costs. It's the only thing under the law. Basically, copying costs can be charged to you, but authorities can only charge you for locating the record. And DPR already said, we already located the records. So we said, go ahead, give them all to us. And they came back and said, actually, you know what? Now that we think about it, you have to pay us $34,000. And we said, okay, this is ridiculous. We're going to sue you. So we filed a lawsuit, and so now it'll go to court in Milwaukee County, and they're going to have to explain why it cost them $34,000 to give us the stack of records that are already sitting on their desk.
See, but this is the thing, Dan. Okay, we'll have to sue them. And they're fine with that because they're not paying an individual personal price. So go back to the Troopis case. Every day this case drags on costs Jim Troopis money. Okay, he's got to pay lawyers, private lawyers. He doesn't get to charge the state. Doesn't cost Josh Call anything. Doesn't cost any of the lawyers at DOJ anything. This doesn't cost DPI anything. Will sues them, they lose. Taxpayers write the check. And that's how it is. That is how it is. I don't care what case we're talking about, whether it's hiding the transing of the secret transing of kids in schools. Will sues, you win, whatever. Money is paid for you by the taxpayers because there's no way that any harm comes to the bureaucrats that you're suing. And that's a broken system. That to me, that is a broken system.
Yeah, that's something we definitely have to look at. There's this issue of immunity for government employees. It's sometimes called qualified immunity in different systems. But there's been a lot of criticisms of government officials who go rogue and who do actual harm to people. And then you can't actually get money from them. The government either foots the bill or there's some immunity shielding them. So immunity issues have been a long-run issue about how to hold people accountable. Of course, we don't want people to be left out. So bureaucrats or government employees have to pay the bill every time they do something wrong. But there are certain behaviors, I think, that we have to look at, and the legislature should really look at whether government employees should be removed or lose their job or some other action taken against them when they flagrantly violate the law or the Constitution.
Yes. And we're not going to have time to talk about Arrowhead. Okay. I wanted to get to three things. But you had a young girl said she cannot share a Bible verse in a speech at graduation. Wrong, wrong, wrong. So Will's suing. And their corp counsel, by the way, there's something else. Hold the lawyers responsible and potentially their licenses responsible for advocating to act against the law and the Constitution. But there's another one. You're going to win this one, right? She might not be able to say her Bible verse at graduation, but when this case goes all the way through, if it has to go to a lawsuit, you're going to win. I would bet my retirement you're going to win this case.
Yeah, it's an outrageous issue about this graduation Arrowhead where kids were allowed to share any quote they wanted to share on the Jumbotron at Arrowhead Stadium to commemorate their graduation. Some kids even asked for Venmo. They made silly jokes. They quoted all sorts of things. She couldn't quote the Bible, a Bible verse, and that violates her religious liberty and her First Amendment freedom of speech. And so, we will, and we'll take it, and this will probably be a lesson to other school districts. But I do agree with you. The legislature should look at what happens to these employees who violate rights. Should they be able to keep their jobs? And I think that's an important question for the legislature to resolve.
Dan Lennington, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. As always, thank you so much for joining me today.
And happy 4th.
You as well, and we will take a break.